Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gitte Mary and my voice is not amazing. My throat is so incredibly sore, but I need to talk to you guys about this. I think it is both hilarious, horrifying, not very unexpected, but most of all, tiring. We're going to talk about H&M's take-back program and some recent discoveries that has been made by a Swedish newspaper. But before we get into all of that, I've talked about H&M many times. They are the masters of greenwashing. I have talked about their campaigns, their different types of advertisement strategies. I've talked about their return program before, and generally I've also talked about the secondhand platforms that's been introduced by fast fashion companies as well. We have covered this in great length. And I've also mentioned many times that the take-back program is just a big fat lie. But right now, some really significant discoveries have been made that will perhaps make this more widely known. But before we get into what has happened, I want to talk about what the recycling program is and also what H&M is saying themselves. First of all, this is not a new concept or initiative. H&M's recycling or take-back program has been in operation since 2013 and it's widely spread across the globe. The gist is that in basically every H&M store, there is a take-back container. There's a big white box where you can put your old clothes into, and then you will get a voucher that you can use at the H&M store. Now, H&M has a lot of sustainability lingo on their website, and this is specifically what they're saying about their take-back program. I'm just gonna share my screen here. We're gonna go through this together, and I have a feeling it's going to be incredibly humorous once we get to the actual discoveries that's been made. But I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's just look at what H&M is saying and not think about it all too much. So firstly, you get to the website. Sustainability is everywhere on H&M's webpage. And I guess that has to do with the fact that they're spending millions on making sure that consumers are, in best case, in doubt whether or not they're actually a sustainable brand. At least I still get tons of comments and questions about H&M and whether or not their efforts are legit. So something seems to be working. But we get to the let's close the loop, which is incredibly vague, and I guess referring to the fact that a lot of clothes is wasted. Because the fact is, lots of clothes are wasted, dumped, burned, discarded in one way or another. And H&M is looking to close that loop, allegedly. Further down, the only trends worth following: recycling and repairing. Now, I said I wasn't gonna talk about this, but okay, this is just gonna be a reaction video now. So H&M is so incredibly quick when it comes to jumping on trends, creating clothes for that trend, and then moving on. Here's a not so fun fact. Today, less than 1% of the materials used to make clothes gets recycled each year. This means that thousands of tons of textiles end up in landfills. By reusing or recycling fashion, we can turn that around. I'm gonna get back to that in a second. Want to keep an old favorite? Take care. Over 10% of garments' total impact of the climate happens after you've left the store. Things like how often you wash your clothes and if you toss them in the rubbish instead of recycling have an effect. So how you take care of them really matters. Now, this is all true. This is exactly the same thing as many fossil fuel companies are doing in terms of what do consumers want to do to help sustainability? They're pushing the responsibility onto the consumer, making it seem as though it is our actions that is the most vital when it comes to climate change and not their billion-dollar corporation. Nice move, nice move. Don't want it? Recycle. Our garment collection program. Take any unwanted clothes or textiles by any brand in any condition to one of our stores. Hand in your bag of old clothes at the cash desk and receive a thank you voucher to use towards your next purchase. Easy. Once you've dropped off your previous loved fashion in one of our garment collection boxes, our business partner takes over. Not a word about who this business partner is. They empty the boxes and sort the contents into 3 degrees. Rewear: wearable clothes are marked as secondhand clothing. Reuse: if the clothes or textiles are not suitable for rewear, they've turned into other products such as remake collections, cleaning gloves. And recycle: all of the clothes and textiles are shredded into textile fibers and used to make, for example, insulation materials. Now, I'm just kidding. Okay, so there are no receipts, no facts, just allegedly this is what happens. Okay, so one thing I'm noticing here is that they're saying that clothes that can still be worn will be worn again, secondhand clothing. So there needs to be some infrastructure to make sure that those clothes wind up in secondhand shops. I'm excited about that. Some of these phrases are incredibly infuriating. I could go into way more detail, but one of the things that also sticks out to me is that they're saying, if you don't want your old clothes, if you don't want to wear the same things, you can just toss them. and then you'll get a voucher and you could go get new ones. That is the mentality that H&M created along with other fast fashion companies to sell more clothes. And the reason why the textile industry is responsible for 10% of our global emissions is because we're producing too much clothing. This program doesn't really change that at all, really. They're still nudging consumers to buy new clothes and still enforcing the idea that, oh, if you don't wear it anymore, you can just toss it. I mean, look, we'll take care of it. We got you, boo-boo, but you'll just toss it. What? In 2020, we collected 18,800 tons of unwanted clothes and textiles through our garment collection program. That's equivalent of 94 million t-shirts. What happened to them, really? Do they have any statistics as to how much was recycled there, how much ended up there? It's just a lot of, oh, and that's it, and then that's it. And then it doesn't really give you any information what happened to the clothing. They're just stating how much they collected, and that's not on them. Like, the collection part was mainly due to consumers bringing clothes in. But what happened to the clothes after they were brought in? It's a lot of, then something was recycled into textile fibers. How much? Percentages? Where did it end up? Nothing. Anyway, again, I could talk about this for hours, but that is what H&M is saying themselves. Now let's get into the juicy bits. Now, we've talked about this before, but this is obviously a scam. I don't know if it's obviously a scam. They're really trying to make it seem like it's not a scam, but it's a scam. It's not the conclusion of the video, it's the fundamental understanding. Some recent findings, though, that came out recently in a Swedish newspaper revealed how much of a scam this actually is. The Swedish news platform Aftonbladet placed tracking devices in 10 pieces of clothes and then proceeded to follow the journey of these clothes through the end-of-life supply chain. Now, Google has graciously translated the Swedish website so everyone can follow along. Let's take a look at what actually happens to these clothes. 10 pieces of clothes were handed into H&M collection boxes. The clothes were donated in January, and during spring, these 10 pieces of clothes ended up traveling 1.5 times around the world, approximately 60,000 kilometers. The first thing that happened was that they ended up in 3 different waste management sorting sites in Germany. And from there, they were transported to some of the world's biggest textile dumping areas. Places that have been notoriously used by the West to dump textile waste, burn textile waste, not recycled textile waste. Now, obviously, this is 10 pieces of clothes, and as H&M also states themselves, they are collecting millions of pieces of clothes. There is, however, very little information on H&M's website as to how much of these clothes are actually getting recycled or reworn. One thing that I definitely noticed about these discoveries was that the clothes that were handed in by the Swedish newspaper were all wearable, and none of them ended up in secondhand shops. What would have made sense also in terms of the supply chain from H&M's perspective would have been to toss them in thrift shops or secondhand shops locally in Sweden where they were turned in, but that didn't happen either. My tea is cold, I'm so angry. Every year, 100 billion pieces of clothes are produced, and a vast amount of these clothes never ends up getting worn, but ends up getting burned or wasted. It's safe to say that H&M's take-back program doesn't actually work. The main reason for that being that it's actually really expensive to take materials and clothing apart and recycle them. And based on how much H&M is charging for their own clothes, it doesn't really seem like they are willing to invest in that kind of infrastructure, in that kind of supply chain. It has never been their priority, and I don't think it's ever going to be. However, even if the take-back program was successful and actually worked, it's still incredibly problematic. Giving out vouchers for consumers to buy new clothes when they turn old clothes in is never ever going to fix the main issue in the textile industry, which is overproduction. It's never going to help. Not even a little bit. It's not a good place to start because the motivation to start the return program was always to get consumers back into the store. It was never to reduce consumption. And the fact is that the textile industry is responsible for 10% of global emissions, which is more than airplanes and cars. And if you're looking for more convincing arguments, I think it speaks louder than anything else that H&M has actually stated that they want to increase their production by 20% before 2030. You know, 2030 being the cutoff point where we should all really have been reducing our emissions, yeah, they want to produce more clothes. So overall, the return program also depends on a really unsustainable relationship with clothing. As H&M also states on their website, in 2020 they collected over 90 million t-shirts, which sounds amazing at first, but think about it again. First of all, the majority of these clothes might have ended up in landfill anyway, so this speaks volumes to our relationship with clothes. A fast fashion chain places white collection bins in every single one of their stores, and that gives consumers the opportunity to get rid of old clothes to buy new ones. I guess many consumers today wouldn't throw away a perfectly wearable piece of clothing. It just seems too wasteful. I guess some people will do that, but the majority of us feels like that is just a little off, that is just a little too irresponsible, too wasteful, right? But placing them, not donating them, in a clothing collection bin, now we're cooking with gas. Even though the result is exactly the same. And I guess a lot of consumers actually think the clothing will be recycled and perhaps don't necessarily have this wide overview of what sustainability means and the fact that recycling doesn't really change anything. But in many ways, these donation bins becomes like letters of indulgence that consumers can place their old clothing and sort of obtain forgiveness for their unsustainable spending without any merit whatsoever and going out and doing it all again. Sorry for this metaphor. Recycling is such a tiny part of sustainability when it comes to the textile industry, and there is just so much more that needs to happen, recycling being the least of our worries. But of course, recycling clothing was never really the main objective with this recycling scheme. It was always to get consumers to buy more clothing, which isn't good for the planet, but it's definitely good for business if you're H&M. And one thing I want to add before ending this video is that this shouldn't shock anybody who follows sustainability news or generally is engaged in fashion and textile, because H&M is always in hot water. H&M is always in the middle of a scandal regarding greenwashing. Every single month, basically, something new appears. A new discovery is uncovered that they are indeed also shitheads in this regard and in this regard. And somehow H&M always ends up bouncing right back. I really hope that consumers at some point is going to realize that this is a shit company, but more so this shouldn't be the responsibility of consumers to fix. And I am hoping to see more widespread global legislation that will make things like this much less likely to happen. And ending this on a slightly positive note, we are actually already seeing a lot of anti-greenwashing legislation. I'm just hoping that this is something that will be an issue of the past really freaking soon. Because we need to bring down consumption of clothing, both in terms of how we as consumers manage our wardrobes, how we as consumers maintain a relationship with textile and fashion, but more so, and more importantly, how companies like H&M and other fast fashion stores are actually producing clothing, how much they're producing, under which circumstances they're producing it, and what happens to that clothing once it cannot be worn anymore. I'm full of hope and rage. Anyway, that was it for this video. I've left all the links down below, so if you want to check out some of the sources for this video and generally just follow the process of these discoveries, you can do that through the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. I will make some more tea and see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green zero waste content and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!